Welcome into Rounding the Bases, the podcast about culture and leadership with a baseball twist, presented by Community America Credit Union. My name is Joel Goldberg. I have a guest on that I've been chasing for, I think, probably a good couple of years to get on this podcast, which makes it sound like he's been eluding me. It's not it. It's just our schedules never match up. And the timing also, I wanted to wait to sync up with something that is going on. And we'll talk about that in a moment. But my guest today has been working with computers since floppies were floppy and data was on tapes. Does anybody remember that? I do. I'm old enough. With us is Adam Fichman, tech savant and sometimes irreverent internet prodigy who bears many claims to fame. If you've ever used your cell phone to put video on the internet, Adam is the one to thank. And we all live in that world now. That's right. His first company, a garage startup called One Dog, DAWG, pioneered the entire process and introduced it to the world. Fast forward to the present, and Adam is the president and founder of Lifted Logic, a KC-based media company specializing in everything from graphic design to print to web, widely considered an expert in his field. His fingerprints are everywhere, from major news publications to major legislation. You could even watch his very own TED Talk. Just don't tell him to watch his mouth, which is a shame because that's, I think, what I told him in coming on today, because Adam talks like what I hear a lot in the locker room. And then if he needs to clean it up, like a lot of the athletes do, he'll do that as well. And I have to say this before I bring him in, that Adam and I met a few years back, 3-4 years back, at, I believe it was a happy hour for Grant Gooding's company, Proof. And I don't know, like, if he and I could look any more different. Like, two Jewish guys, one that looks like me and the other one that has tattoos across every inch of his body and the nose ring and and yet we got to talking, and I think we were both like, man, we're really like hanging out with this guy, and vice versa. And so started a friendship. And I love to get into this guy's head, if that is at all possible, because it's a fun place to be. Adam Fichman, what's up, buddy? Welcome into the podcast.
Man, how you doing? It's awesome. Listen to that intro. I was like, I kind of want to hang out with that dude. And then I realized you just are really good at making me feel good, man. So thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, this has been a long time in the works. And the reason why we've been putting it off, not to mention the fact that you're incredibly busy, I'm incredibly busy, getting the schedules to mesh up or close to impossible, is that I wanted to wait until my new website was out, and you redid my website, Lifted Logic. So joelgoldbergmedia.com. I talk to people about that all the time, but it was time for me to upgrade. And I remember you saying something to me. So I guess I'll jump right into your business and then we'll go backwards. But I remember you saying something to me somewhat early on about there are a million, you maybe didn't say a million, but there's so many people, companies that are designing websites, and most are more like the what's the furniture company now? I'm just forgetting on it. IKEA. Right. Here's, you put this together, this together, this together, but this is like custom made stuff geared towards SEO and hitting, all the people, and they're visually beautiful. There's so much thought that goes into them. This is in small part your world, right? And your passion.
Yeah. I think it was definitely not even like a by choice. I was a special ed kid growing up. I grew up and I spent most of my time down in the hood, in the urban core here in Kansas City. And my parents were just looking for ways to keep me out of trouble. So, they plopped a old trash 80 back on the bulletin board, says an old Tandy when Radio Shack was making computers, and said, hey man, why don't you like take it apart and hang out inside and not go outside? I don't think they really knew exactly what they had started then. And it's all I've gotten to do. It's all I've done my whole life now. And I don't think I knew really how to do anything else. So I'm glad it kind of worked out. 6-year-old passion became a 30-year long career. So,
well, I'm trying to picture a young Adam Fichman, and so I'm picturing like that genius kid or whatever, that super smart kid in class that everybody kind of was like, well, he's a little bit different. I don't know if I'm right on that or not, but I know that you were in your mind had to be so much further ahead than what other people were. And oh, by the way, here's the white Jewish kid living in the hood, as you said.
Well, I was actually in special ed. Back in the early 90s, they didn't really know what to do with kids on the spectrum with learning disabilities. So I was pretty well geared up. I remember sitting there in like third grade and my teacher was telling my parents, like, you better get him into something because he's probably going to end up in jail or dead. And, I didn't really understand what that meant. And so, literally most of my classes, most of my time, I was not the smart kid. I was in the special ed program. They didn't really know what to do with kids back then. Now we've got CAPS and other stuff around Kansas City that, you can go explore different careers. But I was really alone a lot. I struggled to learn. Nobody taught me how to learn. And I think that I kind of just had to work my way through it. It was not as glamorous as it may sound. I didn't know I was even intelligent until I was probably like 20.
Really?
I had no idea. I thought I was this screw up, man. And back then computers weren't a career. Like, I remember my parents saying stuff and being like, man, you need to get outside and like do something useful that you can like turn into a career. You have to find something. And I was like, I don't know. I just really like computers. I was never into gaming. I didn't play games. Like, I was into programming and doing math, but that wasn't like a career. So for a long time, I had no skills, or I thought I had no viable skills. Like, I went to mechanic school when I was 18. They were like, go figure out something to do.
Yeah. I guess, like thinking back to those times, and I'm a bit older than you, but there weren't programs, right? And like, I think what I know about you now, and I know you really well, is I think, man, this is one of the smartest dudes that I know. And yet it's interesting to me that others didn't perceive you as that, and you didn't perceive yourself as that. And hopefully the world has changed. I'm getting off on a tangent here, but I think it's interesting. I mean, now that there's hopefully a place for the young Adam Fichmans out there.
I think I look back and I'm like, man, I had a really strong parental, double parent house, right? So, and I think even one of the first times why I loved the baseball piece of this that changed my life. Not playing baseball because, it's not really in my genes or yours, really. I mean, we got on the right side of the sports.
Yeah.
But
I just talk about them.
Yeah, and I just watch them. So, I get to enjoy. But my dad told me really early on, he was like, life is a lot like baseball in that you're going to fail most of it. You're going to strike out 70% of the time. And if you do that, that means you're going to be in the Hall of Fame. And he never talked about like really the success part of it, right? Like, it was never, oh man, you're going to go slay it most of the time. You're going to kill it most of the time. It was this acceptance that most of the time I was probably going to be failing. But what really mattered was the few times in which I actually stepped up and when it mattered. And so, I always tell people, it's like, I learned way more from failure for sure than I ever learned from success. And I think that's largely about baseball, right? It's like, we got a lot of games, we got a lot of days in our life, but yet some of these times it feels like that's the only thing that matters. Whether, like, especially people like me, I've struggled with anxiety and depression my whole life. And a lot of that is learning that long-term, piece and seeing through it and seeing like, right now I am failing. And so I'm really lucky. I feel like, I think it's a little bit more accepted now. But yeah, I don't know. I think a lot of it comes back to how you're taught and what you're surrounded by, right? As a kid. And I was really fortunate. I had a really good supporting parental system.
What got me the first time I met you, though, was because you struck me as a guy that, here you are at this happy hour. It was a networking thing that didn't want to talk to people you didn't need to talk to. Like, I don't want to talk to people just because that's what I'm supposed to do. Mm-hmm. Right. And a lot of us play that game. Some of us play it better than others. Others have to play it. And then some, like my wife, is like, well, if I don't have to do it, why would I? Right. And but then you and I got talking, and I I had no inclination that you had any clue who I was. I probably stereotyped you, and well, that dude probably didn't even watch baseball without realizing you're a huge baseball fan.
Yeah, totally.
But one of the cool parts about that was I don't think that that you weren't letting on to knowing who I was. You didn't act like I was a big deal, and vice versa. But what struck me is that once we got talking, incredibly engaging, and you have a huge smile and so high energy, upbeat. And I'm not trying to mask anything that goes on with depression, anxiety, or anything like that. It was very, very infectious. And that was my first impression of you. It's still the same today. And I wonder how important that is, or if that's something that developed later in life, because early on, if you were being pigeonholed as that, that kid off in the corner or the special ed kid or whatever it was, and thinking that you weren't intelligent, was there a confidence that came later? Because you exuded confidence to me.
I think it was, I appreciate that. I think it probably goes back more to ignorance, right? Like I was really fortunate that first company, right? So I was out in LA a lot. You think that a couple $100 million as a poor kid will change everything, right? And it does. It changes a ton. But I started realizing that I was getting more people coming up to me and talking to me. And, what largely highly successful people are people in the spotlight, right? Like it's just normal people, right? We struggle with the exact same stuff. We do our job, it's like, but that's not defining those pieces of us. And so, yeah, for me, I guess I just don't ever see anything past a person. I think for you, it was like, all right, man, he's well-spoken. He's interested. That's one of the biggest things is like, if you're not interested, you're not interesting. And you're hyper interested. I mean, even this podcast, right? Like you get to learn so much about so many different people. And I think it's that like addiction to learning. And I think that attracts other people that also have that same addiction. And you see that rather than the job or the people, right? It's like, it goes so much deeper than that.
Yeah. Yeah. I just, you dropped some pretty big names that night, but not in a name dropping way. Like it was almost like oh, by the way. And then I love what you just said about interested versus interesting. It's actually a quote, and I think I had it in my book, from Peter Clune, the CEO of Lockton, who said the same thing during the pandemic about just sitting and listening to people, and how much more important it was as a CEO. I mean, we're talking about a major company here of being interested versus interesting. I think there has to be a humility in doing that and getting over yourself, so to speak. And so I had no idea where this podcast would go, which is very typical of any conversation that you and I ever have anyway, right. which is my favorite type of conversation in a podcast. I don't want to be Mr. Psychoanalyst here. It's more just an interest in, I think, the human character. But I do want to go to that company in high school, because no one had videos on cell phones back then. And a high school kid is coming up with something that would soon become a part of people's lives all across the world. Tell me about the thought process and how that went down, and then how maybe one of your first early lessons in business, how quickly that could get pulled away.
Oh yeah. I mean, I literally, I feel like I've failed forward my entire life. I think that and I guess I've always just thought to myself, like, all right, well, I'll just pick myself back up wherever I fall. But we tend to fall in one direction, right? We tend to fall forward. Some people fall backwards, but eventually you're going to fall forwards again. And this was like, that was the story of One Dog, right? I kept failing. My girlfriend at the time, my wife now, tried to drag a video onto her video iPod. She had a pre-release. It's like incompatible format. So, I reached out to a couple guys I was in the bulletin board systems with that were at Apple and pretty high up. And I was like, hey man, it's an Apple format. I'm trying to put it on here. And they're like, well, we're not really focused on that. We're really just trying to sell videos in iTunes. I was like, well, if it's in the right format, H.264 AAC MPEG, can we put it on there? And they go, well, yeah, sure. But we're not really spending a lot of time trying to put free videos on iPods. So, I basically just said to myself, I was like, all right, can I make a program for the internet that people can upload a video and download it for their iPod? And we did that. And then, a couple weeks later, we had that technology down. We said, well, what else can we do? What else can we put things on? So then expanded the PSP or PlayStation Portable. And then I had an intern who went to college with me. So she was in my same class. I'm like, we're working at a garage, and like she's getting school credit from our college to come hang out in my garage. And
you guys are how old?
We are 19 at that point, 20. She was 20. And she asked me, I wish I could take more credit for it, but Katie, wherever you're at out there in the world, man, she looked at me and she goes, can I put a video on here? And we all looked and we were like, no. She goes, well, why not? When I turn my phone on, a little video plays.
And here meaning, can I put that video on my cell phone?
Yeah, on my phone. Can I put it on my phone? And she goes, well, why not? And so we said, well, you know what? All right, this is your internship. We'll go do some research. And we found out that every phone at that time had a different format. And we didn't care what format we converted it for. So we said, all right, well, look, if you tell me you're sending it from a Razor to a Trio, back when Palm was making phones and still in the game, yeah, I can convert it. We had a lot of really good help, a lot of good attorneys here in town, Hovey Williams, to help us get our provisionals in. And then the rest was kind of history of, we turned down a lot of buyout offers, and it was big names. And I think, talking about your point, so Nick Lachey, when he was on TV with Jessica Simpson, flew us out to LA and tried to buy our company, using his celebrity. And I didn't know any better. I'm a kid from Kansas. And we just kept turning people down. We kept turning people down. And finally we ended up licensing it. And the rest was history. We got to meet some incredible people and be places that a homeless looking dude like myself should have probably never been, hanging out with these multi-billionaires that were building Sprint's network. But it was all just me picking myself back up. Yeah, I was about $2 million in debt. And I don't know why the hell the hosting company ever let us do it on my own name, on some 19-year-old kid's name, but we just kept picking ourselves back up.
So at a certain point, you're building yourself a name in the tech community, some version of the community existed. It's not like today. And right. Social media wasn't then what it is now, which is a whole different discussion. But eventually you're rubbing elbows with names like Elon Musk and with Mark Zuckerberg, who, in talking to you about those names, when you, again, I don't want to use the word dropped, you weren't being obnoxious or anything like that. It was almost like in passing conversation, big deal, whatever, who cares? But you knew those guys. You've been around those guys, right? I mean, how did your world collide?
Yeah, there's a cool history on the web, right? So, we had the first .com explosion, and then it died in the 2000s. And what a lot of people don't realize, there was the web 1.0 and the web 2.0. And the only difference, people used it as style, and what it really meant was, if you remove all the users from Instagram, what's left? Nothing. If you remove the users from Facebook, well, there's ads left. But past that, there's nothing. So this movement, right? MySpace was really the first iteration that kind of brought it in. We were basically just over-glorified aggregates. We didn't do anything. The first .com, everybody produced content, College Humor and all this stuff, and they put it out there. So all we were doing was we were aggregates. So when we started planning, the Mark story is a really funny one. So we were planning on ways, we were scrappy. There was 200 of us companies that were really active. It was I remember the day Vimeo announced that they were going to open up, right? Because they were a huge competitor. They became a huge competitor. And so we figured out how to run an exploit on Facebook that basically added a bunch of users into this group that we had. Well, we got an email from Mark, and the subject, for your editor's sake, we'll just we'll use some first letters here. The email subject line was, "What the F are you doing?" And the from email was Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook at that time, right? There was maybe 8 people at the time, right? They were invite only. They were starting to ramp up these colleges. And he said, basically, I've noticed this traffic on our servers. If you do not turn over and help us to figure out what is going on, we're going to sue you for bandwidth wastage. And that was how I met Mark. So through that relationship, obviously it grew a little bit deeper. We got to do some consulting and help them out on building out their ad platforms and monetization strategies and all that stuff. But largely it was a small environment. We were all just a bunch of kids trying to start some cool stuff because largely we didn't know where else to fit it in life. So it was always just this weird organic thing that all of us, I mean, even him included, I think he would tell you, we kept making mistakes. And that was what calloused us up to it was like every little damage always just, you kept building on it. And so I think we both kind of experienced that similarly. And it was really common back then. We were at the burden of a bunch of people who weren't really our clients telling us that they were our clients. We were hosting free videos, but we lost somebody's wedding video and we felt like we destroyed the world when they were not really a client, but a client. It was a weird time, man.
And I don't even know that we have time to get into what's become of Facebook and Zuckerberg. And I mean, I don't know.
I do not use social media. I haven't used it for the last 10 years.
That's amazing.
Our company does social media work. I think, we should do a whole hour on privacy online and expectations. And I'm always down to pick that one back up whenever.
All right. That discussion will forever be ongoing.
Yeah, right.
Not forever, but it's only evolving and getting worse. And then Elon Musk, what was the story with him?
That's a really interesting one. We actually met Tesla on Reddit. And we find that the most organic, like we've never really gone out looking, even as a company now, we don't have any salespeople. We have 4 years of work booked out and we just pick our stuff. And I think that's largely been my life is it's just been like, I'm just going to keep doing this. So, I'd bought one of the first probably 12 Teslas here in Kansas City. It was really early on and I posted online. Basically, I was like, hey man, I got a cable built. Do we have an SDK? Do we have a development kit or any of this stuff? And somebody reached out and DM'd me and said, what the hell are you doing? Who are you? And it was somebody at Tesla corporate. And they're saying, hey, we're looking at building out our apps. We don't really know what's going on. They had, if you got any early Tesla adopters, they had an app store with nothing in it, right? It was like, we could see it was coming. We knew that was a part. We know that even still now, it's not really a huge piece of the Tesla environment. They got their little games and stuff. But it's going to be a lot closer to our phones, right? We download what we need if we want to. So they asked us if we would be willing to basically brainstorm ideas. And if they liked them, they got to pay us to build them. And if they didn't, we would all just pass. And so, of course, I said, absolutely. We just get to brainstorm and come up with stuff. And then if you like it, we get to build it. And so that was really, again, it was raw. It was not this like structured, we're going to send them some mailers and all this stuff. It was really just living life and finding opportunities wherever we found them. I mean, hell, us meeting at a happy hour, right? Like you just never know. And you never know who it is or who they are and what they're going through inside. So yeah, man, most of our stuff's been really raw and organic.
Which I think is the best way. I really do. So
yeah, sure.
When did you get to a point where you wanted to start Lifted Logic?
Man, I think it was right after One Dog. You think, and so for a lot of young entrepreneurs out there, I'll ask them. I'll say, hey, why do you want to start a company? And they'll say, because I want to make a bunch of money and not work. And they think what we've said and what we brought up, right? Everybody's like, hey, man, you're going to go, you're going to make money, you're going to get out, you're going to do your thing, you're going to do better than your parents and all this. And largely it's measured monetarily. So I'll ask the question, I'll say, okay, if you think happiness is caused by money, a lot of people will push back. I had a guy over in Japan when we were working with Docomo tell me this. And he says, okay, you win the lottery today, $50 million. Are you happy? I said, absolutely. He goes, is anything going to change that? I said, no. He goes, we just got a call. Both of your parents passed away. You still happy? I said, no. He goes, but you won the lottery. Well, no, I'm not. He goes, why? Money causes happiness, right? He says, you Americans have really got this sideways. He goes, what you're really trying to tell your kids is that you want them to find purpose. You want them to find fulfillment in a career that can provide for your family because that becomes your purpose. And that's why that money is an aggregate to some of those experiences and to your family. And that hit me really deep. He told me this term called ikigai, Ikigai, ikigai. And basically it's, what the world needs, what you can be paid for, what you're good at, and it's this overlapping in the middle of how you look at finding purpose. And so for me, that is really why I started Lifted Logic. I wanted to be able to find my own purpose. Everybody kept saying, "Oh, dude, you did it." It's like I assume what a lot of the ball players when they graduate, everybody's like, you've trained your whole life to do something and then you did it. And then you can't play anymore.
And then what?
And then what? You have, the thing that you've hung your hat on for your entire life of what everybody says, your goal and your mission and all this stuff. And then you end up doing it. And then what? And so I had to find my and then what, and that is Lifted Logic. And I hope to, the main purpose was to give that same ikigai to my employees and to my customers and let them experience the fact that like, you can be really good and really weird and really out there. You don't have to have a high school degree. You don't have to have anything, but you do have to be interested. You do have to have a passion, and it can change. When I had my 2 kids, my purpose changed pretty quick. But what I hung my hat on for happiness didn't. And that was still chasing that purpose. So that's the real reason behind Lifted Logic and why we didn't want to have salespeople. I didn't want to have clients that I'm like, I need the money, but I got to do it. So it's a really weird thing. And we've proven that growth can come from this as well. After 15 years of tripling every year, trying not to, it's been a wonderful journey and it's been a wonderful, process of finding my purpose. And I'm sure it's going to continue as we grow. So.
Well, what's pretty awesome on that too is you're doing it with your wife.
Yeah, man.
And your employees. I don't know what you call them, if you got a term or whatever, but like you've got great people. You got great people.
Right.
Which is amazing.
It's weird for me when they say like, I'm their boss, that's like the one rule around here. It's like, oh man, I'm a resource. Like there's nobody, people end up leaving. We don't fire people, right? It's like, it's this coming to place where it's like, it's never bad. We've been really fortunate. Like we set honest expectations and I want to help them. I mean, that's it. Because the better they are, the better they serve our customers and the happier our customers are and the more we get to provide. And it's just, it's funny, Joel, I'm sure a lot of people have talked to you on this podcast too, right? About like culture. We have a lot of people that are like, how do you make culture? And you're like, I don't know, man. You just be a good person and care. I mean, I think that's what you've created too with like, as you grow, right? It's like, how have you created culture and as you've gone through things, right? And like, you've witnessed it in a much different way than I think a lot of people have witnessed culture creation.
I'm so fascinated by all of it, and it continues every day. There's no, I've said this before. You don't check a box. Okay, I got that. We're all done. Never stops. If you're doing it right.
So when you go out and you're doing a lot of your speaking engagements, right? Like I've talked to a lot of people and they're like, oh my God, dude, once Joel left, I was energized. I felt connected again. Like, as you go out and speak and you see these things transforming through the audience, like how does that affect you? Like, do you vibe with those speaking engagements? Like when you're out there talking, like, how do you feel that culture transforming? And then, do you end up seeing it going back? Like what has your experience been on a lot of that?
I think like for me, a lot of it is, and I don't know that I'm going to answer this right, but because I started my speaking thing, that was very organic. I stumbled into it. I would never have met you and so many others, or be doing this podcast. But there's a level of intimacy to it, even in a big crowd, and you do a lot of speaking as well. All it takes is one person to reach out afterwards, whether that be via email, whether that be walking up afterwards, and they share what they took from it that moved them or changed them, or you hear that later on, and you just sit there and say, I was a part of that I helped with that. So there's a purpose piece there. Like I say all the time that I'm living my dream on the TV side. This is what I always wanted to do, but I didn't understand the impact that it could have and the platform and the possibilities it would offer without ever knowing that those existed or even without looking for them. So what I mean is that I can finish up any TV broadcast and feel good about it or not, or for the most part, I don't think a whole lot about it anymore. And it's always nice when you bump into someone at the store or in public or even an occasional nice message on social media. Hey, we love the broadcast. That's great. Very appreciative, but this just feels more personal. It feels more life-changing potentially. I don't know that I answered what you asked, and I don't know why the hell you're asking me the questions now, but
no, I mean, dude, it's a lot of people, right? It's like we're in a unique spot where, I think for a lot of people, maybe the easiest way is like you look at that musician up on stage, right? And they lose any sort of basically depth, right? It's like they're putting on a show, they are performing, they're putting music out there. And a lot of the time after the show, right, you see them and it's almost on this elevated platform. It's almost like a different level of human, right? And you've experienced that in a lot of ways. And I've experienced it not in the same media way, but from our group, right? People are like, oh, dude, like if I'm speaking, oh man, like we're going to go and having somebody take a picture with you and you sit there and process it. And it's like, am I using what I've got internally to perpetuate that story that I get to live every day, right? And like we've talked about your speaking stuff, it's like it's completely different, right? So like I'm sure I literally right when I was setting up in here, my animator in the other room, he comes in, he's like, "Oh, dude, big deal now with Joel Goldberg, huh?" And just experiencing that, right? And like a lot of people are like, "Why would you keep doing this? Why would you do a podcast? Why would you've got a TV gig, right? Like you've got everything everybody wants." And I think that watching that power distribute, right? Like
that's deep. But I also think, I don't know, I think that might be putting someone in a box like, oh, well, you already have that, and that's Major League Baseball, and that's that. Like, what more could you possibly want? And it's not that I wanted more. Although I think you always want more, or you want to be challenged. You want, whether that's mentally or purpose, you want to be challenged. What more can I do? What more of an impact can I make? And so, I have the parameters of television. I love what I do there. It's like they pay me to talk about baseball every day. My goodness, what more could you want? But I'm living by someone else's rules there, and I try to honor all of that. This is my thing. I could do whatever the hell I want here, and that meaningful conversation. Like there's no one in my ear right now telling me, what, you're getting off topic, which I do a lot anyway. And I didn't know where we were going right now, and maybe somebody learned something from this podcast, and it's cool to be like, hey, we love you, we love baseball, we love this. It's great to put a smile on someone's face. It's great to take a picture with someone, and 10 years later they come back and say, hey, this was me when I was 10 years old, and they're 20 now or whatever. Like that's cool, that's great. But it's even more impactful when someone says, you know what, I was ready to quit my job, and you gave me the motivation and the understanding of the role that I could play while I'm looking to go elsewhere and make the best of the situation. Things like that were like, wow, someone went to bed tonight in a better place. So anyway.
I was going to say, it's a really interesting thing because a lot of people, I think, listening and working towards, I think, largely what they would say we've achieved, when we both sit here and honestly and rawly say we haven't even come close to achieving what we're supposed to.
No.
That's a really weird burden, right? When people see that and they're like, I want to be you. And you're like, I don't want to be me. I want to be over there. I want to keep progressing. And so it's that weird balance, I think, that, you triggered it when you said, why lifted logic? Why keep doing it? Because I get that question a lot, right? Like, man, you got hundreds of millions of dollars. Why wouldn't you just disappear on an island? And it's a weird thought, right? Because we don't even see it like that. It's like, yeah, are we successful? Yeah, sure. But not, and it's like, it's not, and it's that continuation. And so I love being a part of your story of that here on this podcast, right? Because it's like, that's
really cool.
I mean, it's an honor, man. I dig this. I think this is really cool, and I'm glad I'm here. And this was,
I mean, the feeling's mutual, and the thing, And I don't think if anybody else said that, which is always a little bit uncomfortable. Like, no, it's not a big deal. But what I'm hearing from you is much deeper than that. Like, but that's the man. This is like what conversations with you and I are like on the phone or
Yeah.
on FaceTime or on Zoom. So we're just taking people into like the feel goods here. By the way, you do sometimes disappear to an island for a little bit. So let's not totally right.
But you know what? There's full internet access there. So sometimes I still have to
Fair
get on
enough.
I was like deep in the jungle at our house, which, it's like satellites beaming across internet and trying to take Zoom calls. And this is the best, one of the best things somebody told me is like, it doesn't matter if you fly on a private jet or on a commercial flight, you're still bringing the exact same baggage with you. And I think whether or not you're sitting in an island in the Caribbean or back here in Kansas City in the hood, I still have the exact same baggage no matter where I'm at. And I think that's probably really true to all of us. It looks more glamorous carrying baggage onto a private jet, but it's the same damn baggage.
Yeah.
So
I want to hit my baseball themed questions because you and I will go down a lot of rabbit holes here. But biggest home run that you have hit in your career?
Oh man, that's not a fair question. And then you know what? I don't even know the questions beforehand, so I wanted to make it as raw and honest as possible. I would say,
other than marrying Emma.
Oh man, yeah, that's a grand
slam. Yeah.
I mean, I feel like I stole that one though. That was like an in the park one. I didn't. That one's not a clear one. I just ran with it really fast. No, I think I think one of the big ones for me was providing health insurance for the employees. I know it's not like the sexiest answer in the world, but that for me was one of the greatest gifts that I ever got to give them. And for those of you guys that have started a business, I mean, it's expensive, it's hard, it's and covering it and paying for it for them. And I think for me, that was a lot of these people were, they didn't think they were going to have that. So that's probably one of the ones for me that really, really, really stands out for sure. Yeah.
Second baseball themed question: biggest swing and miss you've taken, and what did you learn from it?
Oh my God, all the time. I swing and miss massively daily. I'm like spinning around missing, like falling over, swinging hard. I don't think that I don't even think I could tell you one. I fail constantly. And if you asked Emma this question, I'm sure she'd have a lot more answers for you. But no, I've accepted failure as a part of my life. So I don't even really pay attention to it like that. I mean, I wish I had a better one.
I like it though, because it's very real. It's very, you don't have to identify a specific one. I think there's just and you touched on it earlier, there's a deeper message about failure. And
yeah, man, it's,
moving forward, falling forward.
I enjoy it. I enjoy swinging and missing. It's like, I like going back and watching the tapes. Like I like learning from my failures because I know I'm not going to repeat them again.
The last baseball themed question, and then I've got 4 to wrap it up. The last baseball themed question is small ball. I wrote the book on that. The bunts, the singles, the sacrifices, the stolen bases, the defense. What in the lifted logic world or the Adam Fichman world, they're somewhat the same in some ways. What is small ball to you? What are the little things that add up to the big wins, the big results?
Small ball is my life. I can't say that I've had any massive successes either. I think that's why I'm like struggling with some of that stuff. It's because it's like, how can you say what your favorite single was? I don't know. For me, it is that every day. Like it's that failure and single. I don't really hit big home runs. I really don't. I don't really chase them either. I don't look for like, oh, that's the golden goose. Like for me, it's always been a hedge. I've always hedged most of my life, and small ball for me is, and probably because my dad, we grew up in a small market team, right? Like we grew up at Kaufman. We grew up with the Royals. I had season tickets from childhood. And so it was always, that was more of that mentality for a long time and a little less success for a while, but we needed that. My life is small ball. Every day I just wake up and it's those little things, man. It's all of that adding together. It's grinding it out. It's showing up. I work 70 hours a week, but I love it. And I get to do this. Yeah, my life is small ball.
Okay, 4 final questions as we round the bases. And this one, I think if I remember correctly, you had someone as a babysitter as a kid that turned into be somebody pretty famous, and it'll all tie into living in the city and your dad and this unique existence. Can you explain your dad's place in the music world, and then how in the world you ended up with a certain someone being your babysitter?
Yeah, man, that's a really cool. Yeah, man, you got a great memory. I have done too many bad things to my brain apparently because I can't even remember yesterday. Man, so my dad about 50 years ago, my dad started selling bootleg 8 tracks at carnivals out of the back of his van that he bought with his bar mitzvah money. He Man, this is I don't really get asked about my dad a lot, surprisingly, and that's awesome, man. He's hanging out with my kids right now, so he's a special dude. So he slowly over time started building his retail establishment, his music store, and in that music store, it was a head shop as well. So, you know, it has been an interesting childhood for sure, and there's some adult toys and stuff in there. You can define those
Naturally.
Yeah, of course. Right. Of course. That had to be. He's about as he's not what, if you saw him, he's not what you'd expect to own Seventh Heaven. But you know, one of the most proud moments I think of him and how a lot of this started was he saw what was happening in the urban core and with a lot of the young Black youth, and that was this movement towards making music and expression. And he saw a lot of them hustling at gas stations, a lot of them trying to, you know, it was a grind, right? It's survival. So he said and put together the first consignment program in music in the Midwest for sure. You know, it's hard to say what happens everywhere, but he went to this group of rap artists, upcoming hip hop artists that were living around. He said, look, I don't want you guys to be hustling at gas stations. I want to teach you guys how to create an actual income. So what he says is, look, you can charge me whatever you want. I'm going to teach you some basic business. How much do you want to make? How much do you want to sell me this CD? And they would always go, well, $10. He'd go, okay, well, then I'm going to sell it for 20. They go, well, nobody's going to buy it for 20. He goes, okay, so if you sell it to me for 5, I'll sell it for 10. That you get to set your price, but I'm always going to double it. And that's what I'm going to have, because I'm going to have theft and I'm going to have storage and they're not all going to sell, but I'll go ahead and so you guys put it in the store. And when you guys get people out, you can look legitimate and go, oh yeah, my stuff's in Seventh Heaven. You know, it's legit. It's in a store. It's like if you're writing a book, right? You see it in Barnes and Noble. It's real. So he said, every Thursday you can come and we're going to give you a actual paycheck and we're going to help you file your taxes. And people like Tech that were young and in the community, Tech 9 and 57th Street Road Dog and Big Scoob and Icy Rock and a bunch of these guys and Don Juan and a lot of in Fat Tone. If anybody, I'm sure there's a ton of underground Kansas City rap fans listening right now, but these guys came in and my dad had this desire to help them to grow and make their own money. And so when Tech came out with Angelic, my dad flew Universal out and did a huge signing, and it went all through the night and they shut down Troost. And, you know, but I got to watch him helping constantly this local group. And for whatever reasons, you know, I said, I don't want to ever go into, I don't want anything handed to me. Right. I got to go do my own thing. And it's still there. It's been 50 years. He sells a ton of vinyl, smoking accessories and all that kind of stuff now, but I've watched him fail and still help the community and succeed all in one thing. And so, yeah, it was wild. You know, we got to see a lot of young and hungry entrepreneurs create music and succeed because of him. And he's an incredibly amazing man. So
yeah, I need to meet him. I've never met him. I would love to. And Tech 9, good babysitter?
Yeah, man, he was good. I think he probably let me wander around a little bit more than I needed to at the store, but yeah. Maybe Icy Rock. Icy Rock was probably a little bit more. Who was one of his producers back in the day? That, you know, it was a small group. He was probably a little bit more strict with me. He wouldn't let me get in trouble. Aaron didn't really. Yeah, he was. Let's go listen to some bangers, man. Let's go put on some. And I'm like listening to these words, right, as like a 8-year-old kid, thinking that I'm the same as him, right? Like my dad adopted I have an older Black brother, so I was very, very confused as a kid. You know, we moved out to Johnson County, and I looked around and I was like, man, Dad, did you know I'm white? Like you know, I had no idea, man. So, but watching him for real, it's been, I owe so much back to my father.
Yeah. So,
Man.
second question, then tell briefly the story of your brother.
Yeah, Nate. So my dad was driving down the street and watched him get hit by a taxi cab. Nate was 13. He was living in a park, and he was homeless. My dad pulled over. He said, "Hey, man, I'm gonna call your family. We need to go to the hospital." Nate says, "I ain't got family." My dad says, "Yes, you do. Yes, you do." He says, "No, I don't. I live over in Tower Park, which is right over, if you know Kansas City, over off Holmes, and in the bathrooms. He's sleeping in the bathrooms." My dad says, "You do now." Picked him up, got him there. Immediately after that, Nate's been on Social Security and disability. Nate, he just had a stroke and a heart attack, sadly, this year. He's been alcoholic his whole life. I love that dude. His parents got him drunk, his grandparents, thinking it'd be fun to watch him stumble around. So Nate is an amazing soul in a grown man's body. And so my dad built him a little house in the back and kept him employed and worked and gave him purpose. And you experience a little bit differently. I don't think I had the same racism directly at me, but when we were in Sedalia and there was magically no room at the restaurant when I'm with Nate and you're looking around at empty tables, I probably could have eaten there, but I had to experience it secondhand through him and feeling like you can't do anything to help him. So it was, my dad is a very special man for sure. So
third question as we round the bases, for a kid that was stereotyped and everything we discussed before, and not sure what to do with the kid, but everybody assumes, including the kid himself, that he's not all that smart because that's what society was telling him. To be on stage doing a TED Talk, what was that experience like for you? I don't know if I'm overblowing it or not.
Oh,
but,
no,
that's a huge deal.
I think, what is that like, when you're feeling yourself, right? Like, I think so much of it is once you've accepted who you are, a lot of the other stuff is kind of just gone. And I was fortunate that it happened later in life because, had I done it when I was 22, I would have lost the meaning. I think some of those times are times when, again, you're connecting with this crowd, but taking it in and slowing it down and realizing, I'm sure it's like when you were probably doing the World Series, right? There's just that moment when it's an abnormality in your normalness and you take it in and you get to feel that. And that's a powerful time, right? It's like you remember those emotions. Even I struggle with emotions, right? I don't think I have them in the same way that a lot of people do being on the spectrum, but you remember those so uniquely. It's like when you remember a smell. How can you describe what that vanilla candle smelled like? But you remember it, right? And the whole time in the presence, for me, that's what I really took away from it. It was probably way more selfish. I'm glad I got to do one and it was cool, but being there and feeling myself through that entire thing with the lights and the crowd. And I brought my whiteboard, I looked like the least tech. I brought my dinged up whiteboard on stage with me. I'm like rolling it out. They're like, what the hell is this dude doing? That was a memory and an experience I'll never forget. And in a much different way than probably it being a TED Talk, just that feeling.
Yeah.
It was incredible. And what an honor. I still don't think, I still have a lot of imposter syndrome. I'm sure you do as well. Like,
absolutely.
Really? Like,
absolutely. I do want to encourage everybody to watch the TED Talk. You'll see Adam's just infectious energy and love in that. It's so well done. And I've heard you speak at a couple of other groups too. But last question to walk off. I can't believe I'm going to lump all this together. It's only because I ran out of questions. And so by no means do I mean to lump all of your plants, your beloved plants in your garden with your wife and your two sons, but maybe they're all sort of like family to you. I don't know. So just tell me what, here's this, brash talking, deep thinking, awesome dude, now father. And he also has this obsession at an unbelievable level with gardening. And I guess I could wrap that all into how important it is to get away.
Yeah. The gardening is like the tool in which I get to use, I think, to connect to something way larger. Like, I think getting away and all that, right? It's like, there's something about, when I grew up, gardening was punishment. Go pull weeds. right? And it was a very negative approach towards me getting my hands into dirt and nature. And marrying a British woman that has a lineage of rose breeders and gardeners in her past, I had a plant that my mother-in-law gave me, and thankfully it was an easy one. And I watered it and watered it and watered it, and and then it flowered. And I realized that my part of this billion-year-old earth, that I got to partake in a part that kind of needed me and contributing back. I don't know. It's hard to describe, right? Like, why does a tomato from your garden taste better? It tastes the exact same as from the store. I don't care what anybody says. Chemically, it's the same. Nutritionally, you could say there's a little, but not really. But why does it taste better? You could say it's fresh, but I disagree. I think it's inherently the connection you feel and you're part of that process to the earth. I don't think they taste any different. But if we think it does, if a placebo works, and I think getting that and understanding that we're part of this life cycle, it was a wild feeling from a kid that was doing the opposite and ripping weeds out of the earth. And that's a lot of the time where we're used to. And so I'd encourage it, man. Find some really easy plants and get out there. And it's the best way to disconnect, even in your backyard. Just walk out there and wander. I love walking through the orchard and knowing I planted this and that peach I helped get here.
Add in Eden and Ezra, and life's pretty good, right?
Life's amazing, man. I have no complaints. I'm really
and my only complaint is that we keep talking about hanging out and it hasn't happened, but that's because baseball season got in the way. So we're going to do that soon. And, I truly, I'm so grateful to call you a friend.
Likewise.
Forget about the website, but I would encourage anyone that is interested to check out liftedlogic.com. They're the best, and their people are the best, and the creative minds over there are unbelievable. So,
and Joel, if I could say one quick thing, I would say anybody that's listening to this, if you've got kids that are struggling, if you've got kids that are interested in things, reach out through our website. I like taking time to talk to people, especially as they struggle in finding purpose and cause. And so, it's like, well, I don't want people reaching out, whatever. If you want to sail, reach out and do that thing. That's not what I'm talking about, though. For me, it's if you have kids or anybody like that, that I want to connect. I want to get to know you guys. And those are the people that I do want to know. So I'd say, please, on top of any of that, even forgetting work, reach out and just talk, man.
That's as good a promo as we could possibly do. Liftedlogic.com. There are a lot of kids out there that will need the help. And if you're listening, if you're watching, Adam was one of those kids. And every one of your kids have a chance to write their own story, even if it feels like they don't. And Adam is that, and one of many, many, many. So, we could do this for hours. We probably will. Again, there'll be another version of it, I'm sure. But I'll get a little sappy. But I love you, brother, and this was great. I appreciate it. Thanks for coming on.
Pleasure. I'll see you soon.
All right, so good. Adam Fichman and Rounding the Bases.